Okay, so we are live, episode 1 of the Prodigal Podcast. I'm thankful to be here with you guys. It's something that I've prayed about for a long time. Um, I'm gonna try not to say so much because my wife got on me the other day, but it's something that I've wanted to do for a long time. I'm really into podcast, and I just felt like that this could be used as not only an outlet for me, but I feel like that it could be, or that it will be, the start of my ministry. Um, I feel like you have to walk before you can run, and I feel like this is my walking stage. God revealed everything to me over the course of the last couple of weeks, and I feel like this is where He's leading me in my Christian walk. So, like I said, man, this is the Prodigal Podcast. I'm super excited. I'm kind of nervous. I'm not even gonna lie. Everybody that knows me, they see me, and I'm a funny, happy-go-lucky kind of talk to everybody kind of guy. But stuff like this right here is gonna take me a little getting used to. But I want to be about my Father's business, and I want to be in His will. So, yeah. A little bit about myself. I'm 31, married, 2 kids. 2 boys, and I got one on the way, a little girl that me and my wife are very excited about. Um, um, I grew up, like any other preacher's kid, dragged to church when I didn't want to go. Um, was involved in church as far as singing, drama, Christmas plays, whatever needed to be done. I felt like I was, the one to do it because everybody knew me. I felt like everybody loved the preacher's kids. So, but I kind of began drifting away whenever I went to the military. I had never been away from home for no more than a week, and even then I was up in Clinton with some, not blood family, but family. And so I had never really been away from home. Whenever I did go to the military, I kind of dabbled in a little bit of things, Basic training was probably the closest that I had ever been to God until now. That saying where it's like, when you're at your lowest, that's when you call on God. That's kind of what it was like for me in basic. Um, like I said, I had never been away from home, so I felt like the only person that I could talk to was God. I had met a couple friends in basic, a couple guys, and sadly I don't even really keep up with any of them anymore. I've got one that stays in Las Vegas now, but sadly nobody else I really keep in contact with. But there was 2 guys that really got me through basic, and that was a fellow by the name of Jeffrey Porter, and he stays in Hickory, North Carolina. And then it was a guy. He was probably in his mid-20s. His name was Chris Phillips. He probably weighed about 130 pounds, soaking wet. Before he joined the military a couple years before, he was a meth head, and decided he wanted to turn his life around and join the military. So I kind of feel like that God was orchestrating my life back then, kind of showing me, that someone that has been through the bad experiences still can turn their life around. And I didn't even realize it then, but actually just sitting here thinking about it, I feel like that God was kind of molding me and showing me back then what could potentially happen to me in my life. But graduated basic, went to airborne school, and that's really where the freedom kind of came into play, because during basic we don't get to have the luxury to go out on the weekends or after a day of work. Uh, we don't really get to do anything but really go back to the barracks. So airborne school was 3 weeks. We could go off on the weekends, and I had never been to a club. I had never been to a bar. I went to both while I was in airborne school, and I'm thankful for what my parents did for me whenever I was younger. I was not really. You could kind of say I was sheltered because I never got to really go to any parties or anything like that, and I'm thankful for that because um, I believe, and this is just my belief, but at a young age, I don't think that kids should really get to experience alcohol and that kind of lifestyle because they're too young to make their own decisions anyway. I know now this generation that's coming up, they're kind of more intrigued and they're more in tune at a younger age than I was. Um, at 14, 15, 16 years old, all I was worried about was a basketball. So, um, but I was kind of, my eyes were kind of open in airborne school. Sorry, keep clearing my throat. But my eyes were kind of open in airborne school, and I attended, like I said, my first club. Um, I attended my first bar. I got my first tattoo. Um, so all of these things they kind of came all at once. Um, Graduated airborne school. Went to AIT, which is an advanced training for the job that you're going to be doing in the military. I was a parachute rigger, so I packed parachutes. So I went to AIT, which is, like I said, advanced training in Fort Lee, Virginia. And the freedom just got even more there. Same during the week you couldn't really go out, but during the weekends you could go and stay off base. And so we would go out, and I was there. Let's see, I was there. If I'm not mistaken, I was there from late October, early November, to February of the following year. This is taking place around 2010, 2011. I, as I mentioned before, during basic, I was close to God. I attended services every Sunday. Um, I was growing in God, and as I when I graduated basic, as I got more freedom, I started living, as the uh, as the prodigal son, so to speak. I started going and doing more stuff that I shouldn't be doing, but the opportunity was there, so I took it. I've always been a very adventurous type person. So when those opportunities presented themselves, I jumped on that hype train. But I didn't really take it into consideration um, what I was doing to my mental state while I was doing all of this because I kind of, was living in the moment. I spoke with someone the other day, and I was saying, I put the term YOLO. Everybody knows YOLO. You only live once. I kind of put that term to use, and I applied it to my life. Um, like I said, my parents were very stern on me as far as what I got to experience whenever I was at a young age in high school. Um, and so I figured, since I was on my own, so to speak, I would take that opportunity and pretty much see what I liked, see what I didn't like. Um, I had a older cousin in high school that I hung out with, and we dabbled in some things that I'll get into, but it never was really one of those things to where it was like, oh, this is the lifestyle I'm gonna live. I knew I couldn't live that lifestyle at that time because I was still staying in my parents' house, and my dad always said to me, if you're living under my roof, you're gonna abide by my rules. And so I would play the devil while I was not home, but whenever I got home, I tried to be a little angel. But I kind of, like I said, I dabbled in what I felt like I wanted to do, and that kind of opened my mind uh, to want to do more stuff. But more so, it opened a door for Satan to kind of creep in and start building the foundation for the home that was going to be his for the next 10, 15, or about 10, 12 years. Um, so I graduated in in February. I came home, and I wasn't really the same. Um, I had experienced all of those things, and I wanted more of it. Um, like I said, I'm a very outgoing person. I love music. For those of you that pretty much know, I love music. I love to dance. I love to interact with people. I hardly ever meet a stranger. So, um, all of those things, if you haven't experienced the club lifestyle or the bar lifestyle, you get all of those things from going to places like that. You meet new people. You um, make friends, even if it's just for a night. It's if I can describe it in any kind of way, it's pretty much like it's just it's liberating, if that makes sense. Like in those few hours, your mind's not focused on your bills, your mind's not focused on what's going to happen tomorrow, your mind's not focused on how bad your relationship is or whatever the case may be. Your mind's not focused on anything but having a good time. um and so I wanted to experience more of that. um I'll get into a little more of me being a kid. I was taught God, and I knew who God was, but I didn't know how to have a relationship with God. I done everything that typical um, middle school kids, high school kids do that are raised in church. um, I got saved. Can't even tell you when. Whenever I was younger. Um, was involved in ministry at church. Was involved in the choir and drama teams and everything like that. Um, but still, it didn't really dawn on me that um, I wasn't doing ministry for the right reasons. I was doing ministry just because I mean I was getting to hang out with everybody from church, and we would go to different churches, and girls would be there, or some of my friends would be there, and so that was one of the reasons why I pretty much did it, just to be seen instead of glorifying God. Um, so got involved with gangs in high school. Uh, got introduced to drugs. Marijuana was the drug of choice for everybody that I knew in Robeson County at that time. Um, and I just I'm a very like I said, I'm a very outgoing person, but at the same time, I'm very easily persuaded, and it took me a long time to realize that. But I feel like I'm this leader, and that I can change people's minds, and that I can choose when to do something and when to not do it. But I was very easily persuaded. So if I seen somebody doing something that I thought was cool, something that I thought would get girls or get me people to hang around with, and then I would jump on that train. And so I got introduced to that. Quickly found out that the gang lifestyle was not for me. Whenever I got chased by about 40 boys from a rival gang on my homecoming senior night, scared me to death. But but I spoke at our homecoming banquet a couple weekends ago, and I said pretty much from like 18, 18, 19, 20 to about 28, 29. Uh, I call that the lost decade in my life, because there's a lot that I done in that time that I don't really remember. plainly because I was so far away from God. There was a time that I didn't even really believe in God. Most of you all know my story when it relates to my oldest son, Judah. He was born at 23 weeks, spent numerous days in the hospital. He's diagnosed with quadriplegic cerebral palsy. He's nonverbal, but as all of you know, he's full of emotions. And I was at such a low point in my life when he was conceived. Um, I People always say, that God will try to wake you up. I feel like at the time I felt like God was punishing me, but I don't. God doesn't punish you. God God does things so that you will wake up and realize, like, hey, what I'm doing is wrong. I need somebody to help me. I need somebody to fix it. Therefore, you open your eyes and there he is. You open your heart. But me, I kind of still went in the wrong direction. At 13 years old, I know I'm jumping all over the place, but I'm just trying to get used to everything. But at 13, I was called by God to preach, and I ran from that calling. I still remember it like it was yesterday. I had a dream, and at the time, in the dream, I was at a church, and I was in the pulpit. I was older. Uh, I was in the pulpit, and I was ministering. Um, I woke up from the dream, and uh, I was aware of the fact that God speaks to you, but I knew He didn't speak like directly to me. And so, I woke up and I said, God, I said, if this is really what you want me to do, can you let me have that dream again? Because at 13 years old, man, I mean, I've heard stories of my daddy being called to preach and other ministers being called to preach, but I never really knew how God spoke to you. I knew that it weren't like I'm speaking to you right now, but it could be. But I was kind of I was second guessing more so than anything, but I just wanted confirmation. And so I fell back asleep and I had the same dream again, but this time uh, it was like a movie screen, and it was like everything on the movie screen went red, like blood red. And after it went blood red, it said uh, all the blood disappeared, and in red blood it said preach. I could still see myself preaching, and it said preach. And so I woke up, and by this time, I knew, but I still wanted more. Um, I asked God again, like, if this is really what you want me to do, like, let me go to school tomorrow and have somebody tell me, somebody that I wouldn't even think knew anything about church, have them tell me. And so I go to school, and I'm in science class, um, Earth and Environmental Science, Miss Hibbert Herzog's class. And I'm sitting beside my cousin, who's not really my blood cousin, but we were raised as family. I'm sitting beside my cousin, and I tell him, I'm like, man, I had the craziest dream last night, dog. He was like, what'd you dream? I was like, man, I dreamed that I was preaching like in church, preaching like Daddy. And he was like, dang, man. He was like, you serious? I was like, yeah, man. I was like it was plain as day. Like I could see it. And he was like, well, maybe it was just a dream. I was like, yeah, I think that's all it was. Well, we're sitting there talking, before class starts, and one of my friends comes in. His name, I'm not gonna say who it was, but it was one of my friends came in, and this guy, he might have knew about church, but he might have. I don't really think he knew, you know, how God operated, how church operated. I don't think that he was really, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Knowledgeable of church. And he comes in the door, and we sat in tables where it was two of us at a table at one time. And this particular guy, he sat beside us on my side. And he comes in and he looks at me. He's like, Zach, man, I had the craziest dream last night. And I can feel my cousin like nudging me with his knee. And I was like, what did you dream? He was like, do you like go to like do you preach at church, or does somebody you know preach at church? I was like, yeah, my daddy preaches. He was like, well, I had a dream that like you were standing in front of a church and like you had a microphone and you had your Bible open and you were speaking like from your Bible, like reading stuff from your Bible and everything like that. And I was like, man, that's pretty crazy, man. He was like, yeah, I didn't know what to think of it, so I figured I'd tell you whenever you came here and see what you thought about it. I was like, I think that's crazy, which at the time I did. 13 years old, being called to preach. I mean, that's, especially for me, like the lifestyle I was living at the time. I'm like, God, there's no way, no chance. I'm not doing it. And so my cousin's over there freaking out, like, oh, I told you, that's what it was. And so from that moment on, I knew that God had a calling on my life, but I ran because I didn't want to preach. I didn't even want to really go to church. I can remember saying, and if you've attended Harvest, you've heard my daddy say this numerous times, that whenever I was younger, I would say, man, when I get older, I'm not even going to church. I'm tired of church. Church made me miss basketball games. Church made me miss baseball games. Church kept me from going to parties. I mean, everything. I remember this one time in particular, and one basketball was at UNCP. And man, if you know anything about street ball, like and one was top notch. I used to wake up on Saturday mornings and watch them on ESPN. But they were at UNCP, and one of my buddies was going, and he was like, man, can you go? Can you go? And I can't remember what reason that we were at church. Maybe a revival or Wednesday night. I can't remember, but for whatever reason it was during church. And so I was like, man, I already know the answer, but let me ask anyway. So I asked my daddy, and one's gonna be at UNCP. Can I go? When is it? It's so and so night. We got church, but nope. And so I was crushed. But of course, looking back on all of it now, I'm beyond thankful that my parents instilled in me Jesus, and they showed me how to follow Jesus, even when they didn't think that I was, paying attention. But the lost decade, I kind of plummeted. I disowned the idea that God was real. Disgraced my family. My dad would always tell me, son, the stuff that you do, you're a representation of me, and I couldn't really understand that at the time, but I do now. And I didn't care. I didn't care about anybody. I didn't care about myself. I didn't care what I did, who I hurt, I was kind of just going through the motions. I dabbled in harder drugs, like cocaine. Alcohol was something that I used at first to kind of have a good time, but it kind of got to the point to where I was in a relationship that was kind of verbally and mentally abusive, that I began to use alcohol just as a way to fall asleep. And I was just I was in a place that was so far away from God that I didn't even know how to ever get back. And there were months that I wouldn't go to church. There were months that I wouldn't even speak to God. I wouldn't pray. I wouldn't even think about God. Um, and looking back on it now, I'm thankful for everything that I went through, because it took me a while. I'm still a new convert. Um, I rededicated my life the Sunday before Memorial Day, and so I had attended a church service. It was pastor's appreciation, matter of fact, and I had been telling my wife, uh, I feel like God's been dealing with me, and I feel like I know where I need to be, but I don't know how to get back there. Just to give you a time frame, it was around like the 1st of September. Um, Whenever we would attend church, and we would go for 2-3 weeks, and then we would skip them about 2 or 3 weeks, or we would go one Sunday and then we wouldn't go for 2 or 3 Sundays. And it was part of me, running, because I knew that God was dealing with my heart, and He was like, "All right, it's getting to the time to where I need you. Like, I've called you, and for such a time as this, and it's getting time." So I would I've never told my wife, but I would wake up on some Sunday mornings, and I would tiptoe to the bathroom, because she would want to go to church, and I would tiptoe to the bathroom, and I would use the bathroom, and God would be dealing with me so much that I wouldn't even be able to sleep. So I would wake up at like 7 o'clock on a Sunday, and I'd kind of make my way to the bathroom, and instead of going back and getting into bed, risking waking her up so she would, encourage me to get up so we could go to church, I would come and I would sit on the couch and play video games so I wouldn't disturb her, because she loves her sleep. And she would sleep and wake up, or um, if she woke up before me on some Sundays and she brought church up, I'd kind of throw it off and be like, let's not go today. We had a busy weekend. Let's stay home and clean up or whatever. But I had my fair show coming up in October, and that Sunday that we went, I felt like everything was directed towards me. For those of you that don't know, um, I had came out with my song, and I was trying to pursue a music career. Uh, I auditioned for The Voice. I know a lot of people don't know this, but I had auditioned for The Voice, and I got the first round. You do a virtual audition over the phone. So I did my virtual audition. Um, Made it past that round. I had to sing 3 more songs. So I sent in 3 songs. They were all of different genre. The executive producer emailed me back and asked me to send in 2 more country songs, because one of the songs that I had done was a country song. And so I sent in 2 more country songs. Made it past that round. I had to have an interview, like a Skype interview, with one of the executive producers of the show. And I'm not knocking anybody that's been on American Idol or The Voice or anything like that, but if you watch these shows, they're pretty much about whoever has a story to tell. If somebody lost a child, or if somebody lost a family member that was very important to them, anything that can sell a story, I feel like these shows is what these shows go after. Not to say that they don't go after talent, because I feel like they do, because everybody on the show, in my opinion, can sing. But I had my interview, and the next, if I would have made it through the interview round, then I would have been flying to Los Angeles for the live audition. But unfortunately, I didn't get chosen. But it was God's grace why I didn't get chosen. And so, because if I would have, I don't know if I would have been sitting here today doing this, because I know that I probably wouldn't have rededicated my life when I did, because I wouldn't have been home to hear the message that I heard. But Pastor's Appreciation, the Sunday before uh, Labor Day. I think I said Memorial Day earlier, but it was Labor Day. Um, and my dad was up, doing worship, and he was talking. He was like, it's such a good feeling to have, your kids involved with you in ministry. He was like, my daughter here beside me, she's been involved in ministry, and my son, who's in attendance, doesn't know it yet, but he's coming. The day's coming to where he'll be up here on this stage ministering with me too. And I had heard that, numerous times before, but it just felt different. Pastor Daryl Callahan got up to preach, and everything he was talking about was about me. Uh, he mentioned chasing dreams, um, whenever you should be chasing God. He mentioned putting those dreams before God. Um, and I was like, man, it's time. Uh, I was too embarrassed, ashamed to get up and go to the altar. I've wronged so many people. I know a lot of people look at me in with disgust and probably with hate. Uh, so I was embarrassed to, go up in front of the church and um, ask, for forgiveness, that I wanted to rededicate my life, because I felt like that people would be like, oh, here he goes again. It's the same old thing. He's in for a couple months and then he's back out for a year. So I was like, God, not today. Not today. So I sat there and I gripped his seat so tight that my knuckles turned white. And I resisted. And church was over. And we were all standing around talking. Me, my sister, my sister's husband, Andy's sister, Kelly, a couple more people. We were standing around talking, and I made the comment that, I was thinking of getting back into church, and I said that after my concert, that I was thinking about, rededicating my life. And the one thing that'll always stick with me is Kelly looked at me and she said, "Don't wait, because you don't know. You don't know what could happen when you step out of them doors." And I had heard that so many times before. That tomorrow's not promised. You don't know what could happen when you leave. You could leave and go down the road and get in a wreck and die. And where would you spend eternity? But whenever she said it, it was like it. I'll use street lingo, but it just hit different. It was like something woke up in me, and I was like, you know what, that's a good point. And so we left church, and I told my wife, I was like, I think it's time to, I think it's time that we, as a family, as a team, get our life back on the right track. And so driving down 95, I asked the Lord to come into my heart and to change me, to change my view on life. And so did my wife. So It's only been a couple of months, so I still consider myself a new convert, but I, I feel such a desire to be involved in ministry because God's called me. And I felt like, for all of those years, I felt like it was a mistake. But now I feel like God allowed me to do all of those things just to add to my testimony. Um, Man, I told my wife, I said, our kids should be saints. Knowing they won't, but I said they should be because I've done almost everything under the sun. Uh, and I'll be able to tell them, hey, don't do this because I done it, and let me tell you how it worked out for me. You know, um, but I just I've my goal is been to get closer to God, to have a relationship with God, not just wake up in the morning, hey, thank you God for waking me up, and go to sleep at night. God, I thank you for giving me another day, but I want to be lost in God's presence. Um, I told my sister the other day, I said, there'll be times I'm riding down the road and I'll be listening to a song that, I want us to minister at church, and it's like I, I God just gives me these little visions of what could happen, if we did minister the song at church, and what he could do through our praise team, or I'm sitting here studying the Bible, or I'm at work in the bucket, and or wherever riding down the road, and it's just like a sermon will hit me, like something that God's just dropped into my spirit to talk about, to teach about, to preach about, because I do believe that one day I will stand behind a pulpit and I will proclaim God's word. That's what he's called me to do. But like I said earlier, I'm still young in my walk. Um, I'm still a little nervous and shy. I know it might not seem like it, but I'm still somewhat ashamed of my past. But I'm getting better. My cousin, again, not really cousins, but raised as cousins. Julius, he's a minister, a mighty good one, and me and him have been doing some devotions and everything. If you don't have somebody to lean on, somebody to contact whenever you feel like I need somebody to talk to, find you somebody that you can rely on. Find you somebody who's going to help you grow, who's going to mold you, who's going to help shape you, and you're going to do the same for them. Uh, the Bible says iron sharpens iron, so shall one man sharpen another. That's plural, or whatever the word is. It's meaning man and woman. So if you're a new convert, or if you're just a Christian that's been a Christian ever since you was 10 years old, find you one person or a group of people that can help you grow, because it's just like a team, like a basketball team. If you've got one person on that team who scores the most points and who does all of this and that, but you got four other people on the floor that are as lost as a biddy in high weeds, 9 times out of 10 that team's not going to prosper. But if you've got 5 people on that floor and they're all clicking and they're all gelling together and everything's flowing good and they know each other like the back of their hand, they know whenever one's going to cut this way or they're going to go that way, they know where to throw the ball before the person's even there. Those are the kind of teams that's going to win. Those are the kind of teams that's going to advance and move forward. It's the same thing in the Christian walk. If you're walking by yourself, you're not as strong. Especially someone like me who's got a troubled past, that the slightest little thing can trigger something in my mind. I was I was addicted to pornography ever since I've probably been 13 or 14. I got introduced to it, and I've been addicted since then. But thank God I'm not anymore. But it's still a hard thing to get past. It's still a hard thing to move on from. Same thing as someone that was addicted to drugs. The smallest thing can trigger that. And if you're not prayed up, if you're not studying, if you're not, really diving in to God, then those things can be the things that make you turn back. I've changed up my whole perspective on everything now in life, and it's really changed the way that I live. I know a lot of people. One of my buddies at work, he was like, "Man, I can't even hardly talk to you no more." I know he was joking, but that's how I want it to be. I want people to see the change in me. I want people to say, "Man, that Zach's not who he used to be. Zach's different." And I want them to ask me why, because whenever they ask me why, then I get to brag on God. And that's the best thing about being a Christian. What makes being a Christian fun is you getting to tell people why you're a Christian, why you became a Christian, what you were doing before you were a Christian, and now what you're doing now that you are a Christian. To me, that's the best part about being a Christian and living for God. Because we were put on this earth to worship God. We were put on this earth to give God praise and to multiply and to continue to do the same thing over and over and over again. And sin and the enemy tries to stop that. But what he doesn't realize is our praise is stronger than his temptation. Our praise is stronger than his temptation. Even if all you can do, I know people's heard this, it's cliche, but even if you don't have to be able to sing like Mariah Carey, you don't have to be able to sing like Chandler Moore, you don't have to be able to preach like John Hagee or T.D. Jakes. All you've got to do is say, "God, I thank you. I thank you for where you brought me from. I thank you for changing me." Like, people don't understand, like, the best testimony is a changed life. Because when somebody can look at you and say, "Man, you are not the same person." Like, what is it that's changed you? When people can see the change, that's how they know. So enough about me. I've talked for about 45 minutes. About this podcast, man, I felt led of God to start this up. I'm a big podcast listener myself. I love hearing about people's experiences and the things that people's been through. And I feel like the younger generation are the ones that we need to be targeting. This podcast is going to be for Christians, but more so this podcast is going to be for sinners learning how to find Christianity, learning how to find God. Because I was one of those Christians I was one of those sinners, that really didn't trust a whole lot of Christians. Because it's sad to say, and I'm going to keep it honest. I'm going to speak on how I feel because I feel led of God to say it. I feel like there's a lot of Christians I feel like there's a lot of church folk that look down on people with pasts. They look down on people that's not on their level. And that's not our mission as Christians. We are to lift each other up, but more so, we are to be disciples of Christ. We are to go out and tell people how to become Christians, more so. Not to bash them or to look down on them or to second guess them whenever they do come to know God. We're supposed to build. That's what we are. We're builders, in a sense of building people up, getting people closer to God. So this podcast is going to be dedicated to, like I said, Christians, but more so sinners, people with troubled past, people that think that they're too far from God's reach, because I was there. I spoke, like I said, at the homecoming banquet, and I had never told nobody this. Nobody. Except for my wife. But there was a time to where, and I mean, I know, as a preacher's kid, what happens if you commit suicide. Like it's you're done, But there was a time that I was so far, and that I had let sin control my life so much that I had a gun to my head and looked at my daddy and was like, what are you going to do? Like, you're a man of God. What are you going to do? Because I know what I want to do, and you're the only person that can stop me. So, what do you do? And that's just how sin is. Sin is pleasurable for a season. I spoke with somebody the other day and said, once the enemy, because whenever you're living in sin, okay, this is my interpretation of sin. Whenever you're living in sin, it's like, oh yeah, everything's fun, especially when you're an influential person. Oh, everything's fun. Hey, come join me in sin. And the devil notices that, and he's like, oh man, that's one of my lieutenants right there. Like, they're drawing more people into sin. But then when all the partying's done and all the alcohol's gone, all the drugs have wore off, there's no more women, there's no more friends, you're lonely in a room by yourself, then Satan looks at you and he's like, man, you're worthless. You're nothing. Look at you. You don't have no friends. You're nothing. Nobody cares about you. Why don't you just end your life? Just kill yourself. So whenever you are no longer able to pull people to sin, and all that you can do is just grovel in your sin and mope in your sin, then that's when he's done with you. He's like, you don't mean nothing no more. Just kill yourself. I'll find somebody else that can bring people to me, that can feel hell. So just kill yourself. You'll just come join me down here. You won't mean nothing no more. And he hates God that much that he wants you to end your life, and he wants you to join him in hell to suffer forever. Like, people don't understand that. People can't comprehend forever. Like, forever doesn't end. And still that's putting it lightly. He hates God that much that he would rather you just end it all and be stuck in hell for the rest of your life. But yeah, you see people out here serving him every day. But with God, it's the opposite. With God, it's like, I see you're broken. That's when I want you. Like whenever you're so torn apart, whenever you're so shattered, I don't know nobody that can take a mirror, a full-size mirror, and bust it like into hundreds of thousands of pieces and can piece it back together piece by piece. I don't know anybody that can do it. I know I can't do it, but God can. And what he can do is he can take that mirror, and even though it's been broken apart and shattered and everything else, he can put it back together and make it look and work even better than it did whenever it wasn't broke, before it was broke. That's what's crazy. That is what's crazy. So anyway, got a little goosies. First episode of the podcast, man. I've entitled it "When God Ran." It's based off of a Phillips Craig and Dean song. If you guys don't know who Phillips Craig and Dean is, look them up on Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube, whatever you listen to your music on. Phillips Craig and Dean. They're an older group, but they're a very anointed group. They have a song, and that's the title of it, "When God Ran." The Prodigal Son's always been one of my favorite Bible stories. I feel like because I can relate now especially, but I think I liked it even more so whenever I was younger, because it showed that, no matter what you did, that God would still want you. And I didn't understand that back then, but, like not conceiving it like I do now. But I think I use that word right, conceive, understanding pretty much like I do now. But so something that I didn't know whenever I was younger, that the parable of the prodigal child, it's not a real story. I always thought it was a real story in the Bible, like about some random person. Like I thought it was a true story, but it's just a parable that Jesus told, because Jesus spoke in parables. Parable is just a story, like a book, pretty much, like a fiction book. Jesus taught in those things because it was easier for us to understand and comprehend, because his ways are not our ways, his thoughts are not our thoughts. So if he talked to us in his God language, we wouldn't really be able to understand. And so he broke it down for us, in parables, kind of to get on our level, so we could understand it and apply it to our life. But the prodigal son comes from Luke chapter 15, and it starts in verse 11 and it ends in verse 32. I'm not going to read the whole passage. You guys can read it in your leisure. But it pretty much speaks of a child that a man had two sons, and the younger son pretty much wanted his inheritance right then. I did some studying on it, and it was pretty much saying, like my commentary said, that his by the way, if you ain't got a good commentary, get you a good commentary. It'll break it down. But it was pretty much saying, that the son pretty much was saying, man, I wish you were dead so I could just have what you're gonna leave me when you die. Like, can I have that now? I don't want to wait for you to die to get it. Can I just have it now? And so, the father, being a father, said, well, yeah, you want it now? Hey, here you go. And so the son took what his father gave him, which would have been about 1/3. It says of the estate, but it would have been about 1/3 of what the father had. So I'm not too good with numbers, so I'm not even going to try to use numbers. But you can pretty much guess where I'm coming from. So the son took his money, took his resources that he had, and he went to a country that was far away from where he was from. Um, he partied it up. He lived it up. He paid people's way into the club. I'm paraphrasing. I'm speaking in today's language. He paid people's way into the club. He bought people's dinners. He bought people's drinks. He paid for people's hotel rooms. All of these things until the money ran out. And when the money ran out, he didn't have nowhere to go. Didn't have nothing to do. So he became a citizen of that country because with no money you can't travel. He couldn't go back home. He got a job feeding hogs, and in the Jewish culture, like a hog was like the lowest of the low. So he got a job feeding the most degrading animal that the Jews looked at as that. And so he was so hungry and he was so broke that while he was feeding the hogs, he got down on his hands and knees, and I can see it through an eye of faith. You ever passed those hog houses? You ever seen the inside of a hog house? If you ain't never seen the inside of a hog house, you ain't really gonna understand. But one of my buddies, he that I work with, he's got hog houses, and so he let me see the inside of one the other day, and they're just all piled up on each other and everything. And I can imagine him getting down on his hands and knees, and his stomach is aching so bad. You ever get those? You ever you be so hungry that you catch the headache? There's a guy that goes to our church, he's like that. But I feel like that he was so hungry that he got out on his hands and knees and he kind of eased his way in to the hogs and pushed him out of the way and made his own spot there at the trough. And as he was opening his mouth to go down to take a bite, something clicked. And he's like, man, there's no way. Like, I could go back home. I know I could go back home. My daddy probably won't welcome me, but he's got slaves and servants that eat better than I eat. He's got servants that live better than I live. So maybe I can go back home, and at the least, or at the most, however you want to say it. But I can go back home and I can be at least a servant. Like, I can go back home and be a servant. And so he gets up, he dusts himself off, he travels back home, and as he's walking up his driveway, just picture he stays down a long dirt road, he can see his house. And as he's walking up his driveway, he's rehearsing, like, oh, Daddy, I'm sorry, I sinned, I apologize, I want to come back home, will you let me move back in? Maybe I should lead off with, Daddy, can you let me move back in? I'm sorry, I sinned. And maybe I can lead off with, I sinned, I'm sorry. Yeah, we'll do that. I sinned, I'm sorry. Can I please come back home? Will you give me a job as a servant? I'll wait on you hand and foot. I'll scrub the floors. I'll wash the bathrooms. I'll feed the animals. I'll do all of this stuff. And while he's saying all of this stuff, he's looking down. And he's rehearsing everything in his head. But as he looks up, he realizes that his daddy's running to him. Like full-blown Usain Bolt sprint. Running to him. And before you know it, he's there. And when he's there, he's not just looking at him up and down in disgust. He grabs him and he embraces him. Like squeezes the life out of him. Now picture this now. If this is you, put yourself in these shoes. A prodigal The definition of a prodigal is someone who um, spends money or resources freely and recklessly, wasteful, extravagant. I got it in my notes. And so he spent all his money, all his resources. He spent everything that his father gave him. That's stuff that his daddy has worked for his entire life. Spend everything that his daddy gave him. And now he's coming back home thinking that, his daddy's going to hate him. He's going to be mad. He's going to be the black sheep, as we all like to say. And his daddy grabs him and hugs him. And he kisses him. He puts a robe on him. A robe signifies royalty. He puts a ring on his finger. A ring symbolizes royalty. He tells one of his servants, go kill the fattest cow you got with the most meat, because we're about to have us a shindig because my son is returned. So, close your eyes and just envision that. Envision yourself coming home, holes all in your clothes, face all dirty, you haven't washed in weeks, you were about to eat pig food, you probably smell like pigs, and you're walking up the dirt road, and you're rehearsing what you're going to say, because you feel so bad, and you want to sound so remorseful, and you're so sorry, you're so worthless, you're nothing. You ain't got. You're just. You're trash. And then you open your eyes and look up, and there's your father in front of you, crying, a mess, slinging snot everywhere, and he grabs you and he hugs you. You smelling like hogs, and he embraces you. And he's putting all these things on you, and he's making you feel like you're worth something. And you're sitting there and you're like, what in the world is going on? I've done all of this stuff to this man. I've took his money and blowed it. I've spent it on alcohol and drugs and women and people I thought was my friends, and just I've got nothing to show for it. I don't even got a shirt to wear that shows what I used that money on. But my father loves me. My father is glad to have me back. That's God. I mean, that's why he spoke of these things, so that we could understand them. Because how many of you can put yourself in this position? I know I can. Because as I was reading in my commentary the definition of a prodigal: spending money or resources. Resources are things that are given to us to use to make people better, to make other things better, to build things. I was using my resource, which was my voice, something that God's given me to honor him. I was using my resource for Satan, not to build God's kingdom. But yet, he still drew me in. He still pulled me in. And whenever I wanted to come in, he said, come here. Come here. I love you. I've been waiting on this. This is why I created you. Now you see the path that I walked out for you. While you're over here walking in the ditch and all the mud and everything, getting all dirty, messing your shoes up. You ever get new shoes? And whenever you walk out of the house, you want to stay on the concrete because you don't want to walk on the grass, especially after it's rained. You're over here messing up your shoes and everything, and you're slipping and falling. You ain't got no towel. You're wiping your hands off on your clothes, getting all dirty. And the whole time I'm sitting here right beside you, walking out a smooth path. But you couldn't see me. But I was here. I never left you. Not once did I say, he ain't gonna learn. He's just gonna be content with walking in that trash. He didn't do that. The prodigal son's father never once gave up on him. I honestly believe, as a parent, I think every day that father walked it into that dirt road and he sat there for about 30 minutes, an hour, just looking down either side, saying, I wonder if today's going to be the day. I wonder if today's the day that he'll come home and he'll realize, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what I did. Please forgive me. And if he does, I got the biggest surprise of all. He's going to think I'm going to bash him. He's going to think I'm going to talk junk to him. He's going to think I ain't going to let him come back. Joke's on him. Because I'm going to welcome him with loving arms. I'm going to love him more than I loved him before he even left. That's God. And then you have the older brother who's jealous. And he asks his daddy, he says, Lo, these many years I have been serving you. I never transgressed your commandment at any time. Meaning I never went against what you told me to do. If you told me to do it, I went and done it. And yet you never have gave me a young goat that I might make merry with my friends. But as soon as this son of yours came, But as soon as this son of yours came, who was devoured your livelihood with harlots, you killed the fatted calf for him. Pretty much saying, as soon as my brother came back, doggone, he's left from here and spent all the money that you gave him on prostitutes and all kind of mess. You welcome him in and you killing your fattest cow so that we can all eat and having a party and everything like that. And here I am. I've done everything that you wanted me to do. And you ain't done jack squat for me. I heard somebody. I was listening to I can't even remember what it was now. I can't remember if it was a Stephen Furtick message or if it was a podcast or whatever the case may be. It was I remember what it was. It was one of the scriptures in a devotion. I can't remember what scripture it was. Lord forgive me. But if I'm not mistaken, it was God asking, if there's a man and he's got a debt of 50 denarii, which was money. I don't know how much money. But if there's a man that's got 50 denarii of debt, and there's another man that's got 500 denarii of debt, and they both go to who they owe the money to, and that man looks at both of those guys, and he says, you know what? Your debt's cleared. Don't even worry about it no more. Which one do you think is going to be happier? Do you think the one that owed 50 denarii, we'll say dollars, The one that owed $50 or the one that owed $500? Which one do you think would be happier? And I believe he was talking to Peter. And Peter, I'm quoting because I don't know 100%. I have to research it. But he said it would be the one that owed 500. He was like, exactly right. Because that man had more to lose than he had to gain. The man that owed $50, he was like, oh man, it's just $50. I might not get to eat for 2 days, but it is what it is. The man that owed $500, he was like, man, I'm not going to be able to make my house payment. I ain't going to be able to make my car payment. I ain't going to be able to feed my young'uns. I ain't going to be able to buy my wife something for her anniversary. I'm paraphrasing again, but I'm just trying to, put it into perspective that we can understand. And it's the same thing with this story. Because the father looks at him and he said, son, you were always with me, and all that I have is yours. It was right that we should make merry and be glad, for your brother was dead and is alive again, and was lost and is found. You've got church folk in the church that's been faithful, that's been there 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years, and they have yet to receive any kind of recognition or any whatever from anybody or from whoever, from God, for whatever. But you got somebody that's got one of the dirtiest pasts of all, and they come to know God. And it's everybody's, oh, we're so happy, we're so happy. Oh, we're ecstatic, we're beyond happy. I mean, you've given your life to God, and that's amazing, and we're so happy. And that person that's been faithful for 20, 30 years is just sitting back in the corner like, they don't never tell me I'm doing no good job. Let me tell you something. God's ways are not our ways. That person with the horrible past is just lucky. Well, they're not lucky because I don't believe in luck. They're just blessed to be alive. The hardest thing you had to go through in the last 20 or 30 years is getting up, going into work, coming home, having to cook a meal. Like, those things are minimal to somebody that's beat the addiction of pornography, somebody that's beat the addiction of drugs, somebody that's beat the addiction of lust. I honestly think that, and I know it's true because I've heard it said before. I think that when we get to heaven, that God is going to judge us, and even though we know Him, we have a relationship with Him, I believe we're going to be judged on the times that we didn't do things that He wanted us to do. The Bible says we'll collect crowns in heaven. There's a mansion waiting for us in heaven. I believe some people's going to have some big mansions. I believe some people's going to have some little huts. Granted, we'll all be in heaven. But I think that whenever God told you, hey, go up to that person and tell them Jesus loves you no matter what you've done, and you didn't do it, I think God's going to judge you for that and say, now you know you should have did that. There's so many people that come into church on Sunday mornings, and their lives are hanging in the balance between heaven and hell. And 9 times out of 10, they leave out of that service not knowing God because they're too afraid to get up because of what people will say about them. I know because I was one of them. I told my daddy the other day, I said, one of the reasons that kept me away from church is church folk. And it shouldn't be like that because God is far too big to be contained in a church. The church is not God. God is the church. If God can bust two guys out of a four-wall prison, what do you think he can do if he busts down them walls of that church and spreads into the community? Spreads into the state. I think that's what our problem is a lot of times. We confine God and he's not meant to be confined. I think that was one of the things that the prodigal son was dealing with. He could have went home at any time. He could have looked at those funds and he could have said, man, I'm running a little low, man. I think I've had my fun. Let me go on home. Let me go tell my daddy, hey, I tried that life, it weren't for me. I'm back now. I'm sorry. Here's the rest. I'll give you what I owe you back. If you want it, I'll get it to you, but that life ain't for me. But he was so wrapped up in sin that he didn't even think about it until he had nothing. And it's when we're at those points in our life that it's like, man, I don't have nowhere to go. I don't have nowhere to look but up. Hey, if somebody comes to know God on their deathbed, hey, praise the Lord. I mean, maybe they didn't get to use their ability, their discipleship, like some of us will get to do, but at least they come to know God. That's how I look at it. Anytime somebody's name is added to that book, we should be jumping around like we've lost our minds thanking God. And so this story here reminds me so much of myself because, like I said, I was in that position and I thought I knew what was best for me. I had been given the resources from my parents, dragging me to church and teaching me about God. I had been given those resources. But I still thought I knew what was best for me. But I didn't. But just because you go through all of that stuff doesn't mean that that's who you are. It doesn't define you. God's already defined you. God already knows who you are. God knows what you're capable of doing. Capable of doing. Because he knew you before he even formed you. So just because you've been through all of this stuff, it don't mean that you still can't be used by God. Because I promise you, if you seek his face, if you devote yourself to him, then he will show you the plan that he has for your life. Every single person, he's mapped their life out from start to finish. And you might ask, well, why did he let me go through all of this stuff? Because he's not a God to say, hey, this is the path I got for you. You're going to walk that path. No. That's not the kind of God that he is. He came and died on the cross so that we could have a choice. That's how much he loves us. He didn't come and die on the cross so that we would have to serve him. He didn't say, hey, God, I'm going to go down here. I'm going to die. So that way, everything will be good. They'll have to serve us. Everybody will make it into heaven. Nah. He came to die so we wouldn't have to go to people who judge us to intercede for us. Now we can intercede for ourselves. That's why he died for us. Don't get me wrong, he wants everybody to make it into heaven. But sadly, everybody won't. But that doesn't mean that we have to be off our job in trying to win souls into the kingdom. But I'm just thankful that God never gave up on me. Even when I gave up on myself. I've been through so much stuff, man. So much stuff. And it's all stuff that I caused. I mean, it's nothing that God said, "Oh, I'm gonna let this. I'm gonna make this happen to him so that he wakes up." No. God said, "Here's a path. You can go down this one. It's smooth. It's fine and dandy, or you can go down this rough one right here. But eventually it'll lead back to me." So, you pick. Either way, if you come back, just as the prodigal son came back, I'm going to still use you. I'm going to still love you. That's the kind of God we serve. That's the kind of God you can serve if you come to know him. It's not about what you've done, because I promise you, the more that you have done, the greater that you will be to the kingdom. And it took me a long time to figure that out. They sing a song, "There's nothing too dirty that he can't make worthy." Because when you come to him, you're clean. You're good right then. He wipes it all away. We just have a tendency to hold on to it. And all it is Satan. He's like, "Oh, look, man, oh, you forgot you done all of this stuff." No, I sure ain't. But guess what? He was all working for my good. Because if I knew back then what I know right now, I'd probably come a little sooner. I'd probably do a little bit of things a little bit different. But I would still want to be used by God. And I would still want to have an impact on people. Not for me, because I prayed before I even thought about doing this thing here. I said, "God, that cross you hung on, I'm skinny. I mean, I'm getting a dad bod on me a little bit, but hide me behind it as much as you can. Because I don't want to be seen. I don't want to be heard. When people listen to this, I don't even want them to sound. I want them to say, 'Boy, that don't even sound like Zach talking.' Because I don't want to get no recognition off of this. Not none. If I did, I would have came on here and I would have just talked good and positive things and sweet nothings and all of this junk. But that ain't what this is. This is kingdom business right here. And we're trying to gain souls. Because that's the task that's been placed upon me. Get people to heaven. Tell them your story. Encourage them. And that's what I'm going to do. So, I don't know how long this is going to last. I don't know what kind of plans that God has for me with this. I don't know. I'm taking it a week at a time. But until he says stop, or until he says move on, every Friday you can look for me. And if you don't have anybody interceding for you, or if you feel like that you can't talk to nobody because you're too embarrassed or you're too ashamed to get up on a Sunday morning and go to an altar and fall on your face and ask God to forgive you, then you message me. You call me. I'll stop what I'm doing right then and right there, and we'll pray that prayer together. I believe in a no man left behind way of life. Not just as it relates to a battlefield or anything like that, but I want my family saved. I want my children to be saved. I want my friends to be saved. I want my enemies to be saved. I want those people that hate me to be saved. I want those people that I don't even know to be saved. Because I believe that there's something inside of all of us that God has placed there that can be worth something. So, that's all I got for tonight. I thought it was only going to be like 30 minutes. But I just don't want anybody feeling like they're alone. I can't do nothing for you, but I know somebody who can. So, I hope somebody takes something from this and shares it with somebody that's struggling, and I hope this encourages other people to be a light, because it's our mission, like I stated earlier, as Christians. Add to that kingdom. So, I had said that after every episode that I would put it out there that I will be selecting 3 people in the comments that I gotta get me a tripod, because every time I slam my hand down, my phone vibrating. Y'all just don't know, okay? Like, at first I couldn't find my mic stand. I was like, how am I gonna set my phone up? Like, I was this close to not doing it. But I said, no, God, I'm this is what you want me to do, so I'm doing it. I don't care if I got the doggone prop this joker up on a flower pot, which I did. But now I ain't gonna be able to get it on there right. There we go. But I want to interact with you guys, man. I mean, by all means, hey, if all you want to do is just watch and listen, just watch and listen. But I want to hear I want to hear some questions. I want to see some comments. Hopefully, some changed lives. But just let me know what you guys are dealing with, man. You heard my story, and there's still a lot left to tell. But I want to hear what you guys are going through on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, so that we can talk about it together. So that we can let God know, hey, there's 2 of us here, 2 or more. Your word says 2 or more are gathered, you'll be in the midst. So I don't want anybody, man, to die and go to hell. I don't. And I want to know everybody. I want everybody to know that they are worth something, even when they don't feel like they are. Especially whenever you come to God. So, but like I said, every week I'll be choosing 3 people to kind of pretty much throw some direct answers at. So I had one lady, Miss Shan. She commented on the video that I had posted, and me and Miss Shan go way back. She was the skating ring mama. If y'all from Robinson County, y'all know Lumberton, Mr. P's skating ring on Friday nights was popping back in the early 2000s. But Miss Shan, I appreciate your question. Um, she asked, how to forgive your abusers and move on to healing. She followed that by a statement. She said, it's very hard to understand forgiveness if people never ask. And that's a very good question, because a lot of times it's hard for us to forgive people that hurt us or people that do us wrong. And even if we do forgive them, it's hard for us to move on from that and act as though it never happened. Um, I said that I would try my best to incorporate scripture with this, and I will. Um, I know it's listed in these 4 books of the Bible, but since we are in Luke discussing the prodigal son, we can jump over to Luke chapter 23, verse 34. It says, "And Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do. And they divided his garments and cast lots." So during that time, Jesus was on the cross, and they had already whipped him. They had already beat him. They had already mocked him, spit in his face, called him everything but the child of God, made him walk umpteen miles, or however many miles it was. I'm paraphrasing. I don't know how many miles it was, but it was a long way. Carrying about a 300-pound cross on his back after it had been tore open. They laid him down and put railroad spikes pretty much through his hands and through his feet, and stood him up for the world to see. And as he was being laughed at and cursed, he calls out to his Father, God, to forgive him, because they didn't know what they were doing. Some people, they're so lost in sin, they don't realize what they're doing to other people. Like my dad would say to me, you're a representation of me. What you do comes back on me. But some people are so lost in sin that they don't realize that they're killing somebody else with what they're doing. So my answer to you is, to your question, how do you forgive your abusers and move on to healing, would be to read this verse, Luke chapter 23, verse 34, over and over and over and over again. And as you're reading it, I ask that you call on God and that you ask him to help you realize the pain that he went through and the suffering that he went through. I just now realized that this is no lie. My marker is on this page, these 2 pages. I didn't put it there before. Right hand of God, it was there. And I'll be praying along with you that he reveals it to you, how he was able to ask for forgiveness for those people that hated him. And how was he able to heal from that? How was he able to still love those people? How was he still able to want those people for his own? And those people never asked for forgiveness, possibly. I mean, it's a harsh reality, but I'm pretty sure the majority of those people did not ask God to forgive them for what they done to him, for what they said to him. But he still forgave them anyway. And if they were to ask for forgiveness and for a new life, he would gladly give it to them. So I encourage you again, Miss Shan, to go to Luke chapter 23, and read that verse 34 and pray and meditate on it. And I'll be doing the same thing with you. And I trust that God will reveal how to do that. I love you. So we're going to close it out with a prayer. I'm happy. First episode in the books. If you guys want to go and read the story for yourself, like I said, it's Luke chapter 15, verses 11 through 32. I'll put it in the I don't really know what it's called, like the little thing when I post a video. But thank you all for listening. Pray with me, pray for me, that God would strengthen me, that God would give me the words to say, that He would give me the time to study His Word, because I've gone to bed every night past 12 o'clock this week. But yeah, I just want to be a blessing, man. I want to be a light. I want to be so empty that you can pop your knuckles in them and they're the echo. But I want Him to fill me with His Spirit and fill me with what I need to say. So, like I said, throw some comments, throw some questions. Three people every Friday will be chosen, and whether it's a statement or whether it's a question, or whether it's just something to talk about on the next podcast, I'll be sure to do that, and I'll be sure to call you out and tag you too, so you know you got picked. I'm praying for all of y'all. I love you, and let's close it out in a prayer. Loving God, we thank you for another successful day, God. We thank you for giving us another opportunity, God, to wake up and to give you praise. God, we ask that you would fill our hearts, God, with kindness, with love. God, we ask that as the prodigal son came to his senses, God, that you would allow us to come to ours and know that even though we've fallen short, God, or that we've done so much to hurt you, that you still do love us. God, I ask that you would just intervene in our situations, that you would wrap your loving arms around us, God, that you would whisper to us and let us know that you're still here and that you still have a plan for our lives. If there's anyone, God, that's watching this podcast or that's listening as they're driving or whatever the case may be that don't know you, I ask, Lord, that they would reach out to you and that they would come to know you, God, before it's too late. I thank you again, God, for placing this call on my life. I thank you for giving me the love of people that you've given me. God, I just ask that you would just continue to grow and increase in my life. Allow me to walk closer to you. I ask all these things in your name. Amen. Thank y'all.